So thank you so much for being here, Miriam and Vicky. And before we get into the launch into the everything that there is to talk about the current situation, I'd love it if both of you can introduce yourselves and say a little bit about your companies. So first, Miriam, can you tell everybody about Terra Wine Trading and the producers that you work with?
Thank you, Pamela, and thank you to Vinguard and Wine Fair and all of the lifting up you've been doing of us as an importer, Terra Trading Company, and me as a West Coast woman in the industry, and our producers. And our portfolios are the Eastern Mediterranean and Holy Land, the Levant to Armenia, the ancient world wine region. So we're a small importer that really focuses on indigenous grapes from those historic wine regions and processes that date back into our traditions and our cultures, and really the heartblood of our hospitality as Arab and Southwest Asian, North African peoples. So we really lift up that as a US-based company. We primarily have our Palestinian and Lebanese portfolios right now, and today I'm very excited that we're having Vicky with us from Philokalia. For me, it's very important to have Philokalia in our portfolio, and also gives purpose to why our portfolios are so important to be in the US wine market. So we started in around 2014, or that's really when I joined the operation as a partner and kind of holding down the West Coast in terms of securing distributors for at that time a pretty small portfolio of Palestinian made wines with grapes people had never heard of. And so my business partner and the founder, Jason Bajalia, he needed to find some partners on the West Coast to connect to the ethnic, business community there, because at first we were starting with getting arak back on the shelves, and arak is our cultural Palestinian spirit, also grape based. And so I had a connection with a lot of the liquor stores since I grew up in really behind the counter retail and the community. So we really started there, and now it's amazing. Vicky and I were talking the other day about how now we're here where we're able to talk with experts in the industry and people that really have a lot of great things to say, and really reiterate the high value of the wine that our Palestinian and Lebanese and Syrian made and Palestinian American diaspora made wines in these ancient regions, and with these indigenous varietals, how exquisite they are, and how they're received in the US market is really where we're at now, and we're so thankful. Thank you, Pamela, for giving us a platform again, and it was great to chat with you on the radio a few weeks back as well. So that's kind of the short and sweet of Terra Trading Company and what we're excited about moving forward.
Okay, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to chat with you again as well. I really admire the work that you're doing and love the wines as well. So Vicky, can you tell us, first I should probably let everybody know that Vicky is in Bethlehem right now. And so not only is it 10 hours ahead, but it's a whole different situation from where Miriam and I are here in San Francisco. And Vicky, please feel free to share whatever you would like about that. But if you could tell everyone about your work and also what makes Philokalia different from some of the other producers, the wine producers on the West Bank. That would be, I think, really great to give everyone greater context of where you're coming from.
Hi, Pamela. Thank you for having me. I was very excited for this talk. So I'm Vicky Sahagian. I work in Philokalia since 2016. I came into this project when I met Sari for his first wine tasting, which was in 2015. And wine fairs or wine tasting in the West Bank, especially in Bethlehem, were not a common thing in 2015. And especially winemakers, individual winemakers, like you have the Cremizan, but it's an institution. But an individual person with a project and a vision and winemaking, that was very unique and very, very special. So when I met Sari in 2015 and I drank the wine, and I already have quit my job. I was a teacher for 12 years in Beit Jala in American school. And when I first tried the wines, and I was like blown away because I never knew that good wine would make you feel this way. Because whatever we drank in Bethlehem were like this cheap. I don't want to disrespect the Spanish or the Chilean wines, but whatever they brought, we drank in Bethlehem. And my first encounter with a really good wine made me think about it for like days and days and days. And then I don't know, for some reason I had the courage. I still don't know how I did that. I had the courage, and I texted it and I said, you know what, please, can I help you in this project? This seems like a really, really interesting and something I felt that it's something that I could find myself in, because it was something that no one had ever tapped. And when you ask your family that now I want to how do you say, like, I want to help Sari, or I want to work in a wine project, no one took me seriously, or no, like the whole society in Bethlehem didn't take me seriously, or in the beginning, because I don't think that they grasped what was winemaking about. For them, winemaking or helping Sari was just about wine or alcohol. But I don't know. I think I was lucky enough to really understand that winemaking is not only about making wine. It's a means to also live your life, to evolve, to have an impact on your society, and even on the world. And this has been my philosophy working in the winery, that I always want to bring the best of what we can offer in this region, or at least in these circumstances, to the world. And it gives me a lot of pleasure, just the idea of doing that. And this is, I guess, my job in Philokalia. And that's why I feel that Philokalia is very unique. First of all, it's a natural wine. People say, oh, this is natural wine. I think that any wine that is made, it's supposed to be very natural. And our wines, especially our wines that are without any sulfites or any additives, they're alive. And really, maybe you would think that I'm very naive, or when I say this, our wines live with us and they interact with us. Every time there's a wine tasting that I open a bottle, or at dinner, you see the wines are, celebrating with us. And that's why I every time this wine gives me pleasure, I like to give it more attention and more. I want to share that feeling again with everyone. This what drives me, and this what makes Philokalia very unique. Very simple.
Oh, great. So I said, I wish I had a bottle with me today, but
I heard, but I understood from Miriam that you tried our wine.
Oh yeah, no, I've had it, and I think it's delicious, and it is incredibly unique. One of the things that makes it so unique is that there are so many indigenous varieties, and I guess that's something I know we wanted to get to, but we might as well discuss that right now since we're talking about the wine itself. So I was wondering about why Philokalia just says like indigenous grapes, but doesn't divulge which ones there are actually being used. And I know there's a little bit of a I won't say story there, but I know there's a thought process behind it. So do you mind discussing that?
Yes, of course, that's a good question. And honestly, everyone asks me, but the answer is very simple. Like everywhere you go, you always have your homework made. Like even if you want to go to a restaurant, you look at the menu, you look at the chef. Sometimes a surprise element is the best element. And why do we have to always put people, let's say, a predetermined taste? Like sometimes I go to like wine tasting to develop myself, and there's always this how do you say, tasting notes that you have to find in wines. Let's say vanilla or chocolate or you know, like a herbal scent. But when you open our wines, let's say if you tried grapes of wrath, there's a lot of different regional herbs in it. Let's say there's za'atar, there's sage, there's olive oil, there's olive oil from the olive trees. So if I tell this, if I tell you or tell the consumer, this is let's say this kind of an indigenous grape, he would not understand what I'm saying. So it's always sometimes better to let them discover the wine and evaluate the wine as they drink it. If it is a good wine, then we can have another kind of a discussion with it. But if I tell him this is, let's say, Baladi or Marawi or whatever, I don't think that it is fair for the wine, because it is a wine without any reference. So I don't want to limit the consumer. Let him discover. He would discover, let's say, an olive note in it. Miriam would discover a sage in it, and there would be so many different discussions that are not, how do you say, the norm when you drink wine that the grapes are known. And also it's our R&D, but it's not only that. It's I like the surprise element, and I think any bottle that you drink, it should be a surprise to you, because a lot of times you have expectations out of that bottle and out of that grape, and sometimes you're disappointed. So it's better not to have any expectations, to be surprised fully, and then you will have a discussion about, okay, this is this kind of a grape or this kind of grape. At least in my opinion.
Okay, so then will you tell me what the grapes are, since I've already tried it?
No, I would not tell you, because I think that it's our R&D, and it's a research of Seri for the last 8-9 years with these grapes. And I feel that he has a lot to say about the grapes when it is time. And I think we have one of the largest research about indigenous grapes in the area that no one has. And it's always nice to share your knowledge, but it has to be the right time. And I think Sari, I trust Sari that when he sees it is the right time, I think he would share it with the world.
Okay, well, fair enough. I'm happy to drink the wine and not necessarily know what's in it.
But when you drank the wine, you loved it and you felt that it is a different wine. It's a unique wine, and I think in the wine, again, this is my personal opinion. Maybe some people like to research more when they drink a bottle of wine, but for me, but I feel that if you drink a wine and it gives you all the elements that you expect in a wine, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. How has it been received there on the West Bank? How do people locally?
Yes,
think about it?
Yeah, in the beginning, there were a lot of challenges with working with wine. I come from, let's say, a background of education. Sari comes from a background of an architect. When we met together, when I met Sari and we started working together with wine, not my family nor his family understood what we're doing. They thought that we are crazy people that are going into this adventure where it's an adventure without any purpose. But with our perseverance and with our passion for good things, now they are very proud of us, and I think that anytime there's a guest coming, let's say from abroad, in Bethlehem, they like to bring us over. They talk about us and they talk about our project because our project, it's not about a personal project. It impacts the people around you, your environment. You know, again, this is our belief that with your work and with your ethic and with your good attitude, you also impact the people around you and your environment. And in an environment when there's so much, let's say, grayness, or there's so much, a lot of things happening, it's also a good thing to bring a positive side of that.
Yeah.
And yes.
And also, just so you grow all the grapes yourself, right? You're not buying any fruit.
In the beginning, we were working with some farmers and we were buying grapes from them. And then Seri rented, and it's very hard to have also land, because land is inherited from generation to generation. You can't buy. Even if you have the money, no one would sell you their land. It doesn't work that way here. But we rented a small land, and Seri started planting his own vineyard. And after 3 years, last year, we took our first harvest, and we are very excited. We have great things coming up this year, especially in the reds. We believe that this is like one of the best reds that ever came out of this region, and we're very excited about it. So there's a lot of surprises coming.
Well, I look forward to trying it.
Pamela, you had the indigenous red a couple weeks ago, so that's what you taste, what we were drinking.
Right, exactly. But this is a different wine.
Yeah, this is a different one. Yeah, because it's totally from our first harvest, and we are very, very excited about it. From 2015 until this year, every year we try to better ourselves and understand our wines better, and try to make it better and better. And our goal is to be in the best wine list in the world. And I think we can do it because Palestine has been the wine region. People grew wines here thousands of years ago. So there's no reason why we can't compete with France or Italy or anyone in the world.
Can you talk a little bit more about the history of winemaking on, like, what we call the West Bank now, especially the modern history, let's say over the last few decades or so? How much winemaking is happening, and what are the challenges that you face to making wine?
I believe that these years, let's say 5-6 years, there's this renaissance of winemaking in the West Bank. We are not a lot. I think we're like 6-7 wineries. There's Nadim in Taipei, and there's Adam Cassis also in Taipei. Yes, there's Ash'ar Winery. It's in I think it's in Kufr Yassif, which is near Haifa. And there's Philokalia, and there's Kremizan. And there are a lot of challenges because, let's say Philokalia, we don't have any access to water and irrigation. We can't have a shed. So Sari, whenever he wants to work in the land, he has to bring all his tools and everything in the car. Work with them and bring them again in the car and go home. Like, we don't have the basic necessities for, let's say, water, a shed, and accessibility also. Like, it's very challenging to have a vineyard, or not just a vineyard, to have anything working in the West Bank because of all the political situation. Let's say in this when the war started, we were banned to go to the vineyard until recently, and for the last 6 months, not even us, the farmers, anyone that had land to cultivate or to prepare for the harvest, for the next vintage and the harvest, we didn't have any access. Yet next to our vineyard, there's a settlement with a vineyard, and they had access to their vineyards. So there are a lot of challenges, but it is what it is. We try to find, let's say, ways to bypass that and to make the best out of it, because our intention is always to make the best out of what we can, and not let anything like this affect us. I mean, it affects us, but not to let it affect us in an extreme way.
So here's a question for both of you, because I know when Miriam and I spoke previously, we weren't just talking about Palestinian winemaking on the West Bank, but also the Golan. And so how would you say that colonialism and occupation have impacted winemaking for Palestinians throughout the entire area of like Palestine, Israel?
Maybe Miriam could ask that,
Sure.
answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think Vicky's narrative of their experience in Philokalia, making wine in Bethlehem for Bethlehem, and trying to really bring a new level of excellence to something that we've are in the origins of, and really a renaissance based on our own history. And I think that's what's happening with the region as a whole. I think our types of traditional spirit and winemaking traditions are becoming the trend. Natural indigenous wines, looking towards a new climate sustainability. These are, adapting to the land with what the land gives you, and reproducing something back for that community, and building up that community. And I think that's what's happening. Is for a long time the European grapes, the European traditions, and even the European blights, like we discussed, Phylloxera was brought to Palestine, and the indigenous varietals withstood it, but a lot of agricultural lands were destroyed. So I think what's happening now, in what is very much part of Terra Sancta's mission and what we share with our producers, is we are building back, our self-sustainability and reclaiming a narrative of winemaking and wine, regions. So yeah, I think that spans as a whole. I mean, we're seeing occupation and ethnic cleansing on these historic lands as well. We discussed Artsakh, we discussed Gaza, and very much, you will see new wine projects that are very much occupier narratives. I mean, that's how Palestine was settled initially, is let's replant a land that's barren. Like, this narrative is embedded in the trauma we have in this industry. And so I think there's a reclamation of that ancient wine tradition that really is ours.
But I can add also that winemaking was part of this region. It is very rich with the process. Like if you go to France, at the Louvre, you would see that Gaza was making wine, and you would see that there are jars there that are called Abydos jars. So and this is references from the French themselves. But again, when the Ottomans came for 400 years, of course, there was no, they eliminated, let's say, the wine culture. And then there was the English with their kind of alcohol. They brought their own, whenever they went, they brought their own kind of alcohol, which was the whiskey. And winemaking became something that people forgot about until recently. You realize that you have such a rich land, and you have grapes, and you have a land that can produce the best wines. Yes, and yeah.
Well, would you say there have been any positive impacts of like colonialization on wine making specifically? Like, for instance, access to equipment, access to information.
I feel like Vicky can definitely speak to how there's this not equal access to what is imported into Israel in terms of the economic apartheid that domestic producers there are dealing with. I can speak to the obstacles we even face with importing products from the region and how we're allowed to label them as opposed to Israeli or other regions which are very intentional about labeling and appellation, and we don't have that luxury to actually be able to name them what they are on a label when we import into the United States, and that's because State Department and other agency regulations and kind of what they designate territories are, right? So we can speak to all kind of ends of how it actually is restricting a lot more than it has given us access. I mean, we have a market that is now interested in who we are, but we have to maintain our dignity in those conversations. Yeah.
Yes,
Can you give some examples? I'm sorry, Miriam. Can you just give some examples about how you're restricted of what you can say on the labels?
Sure. So we're not allowed to say product of Palestine on any of our products. The United States export, import regulations, we have to go through several different agencies, and we have to abide by the designated terminology and categories. And so product of the West Bank are the products that are coming, for example, Philokalia, Cremason, are spirits from those regions, and our Galilee producers are product of Israel or product of industrial area in Israel. I mean, there's constantly changing definitions around settlement products depending on the political climate and leadership in the United States. So these are constantly moving goalposts of compliance. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the USA is now requiring our producers to have FDA numbers. They're not, US domestic producers, but now these things are required. So there's a burden of compliance that also gets mixed up with the economic apparatus of the occupation, right? Because Israel now gets to mitigate all these layers of compliance. That means more money. That means third-party businesses that are now having to interact with us and our producers in getting that paperwork in order, let alone the arbitrary shutting down of commercial checkpoints that happens all the time. I mean, that's just kind of a small taste.
Yeah. Wow. Vicky, how would you say specifically you're impacted by the by the economic apartheid? You were starting to say something before.
I mean, like any political situation or any uneasiness in the region affects us, especially in Palestine. First of all, when you live in Bethlehem, Bethlehem is dependent on tourism, and like the economy is based on that. And when the war started, or when there's this these issues that are ongoing issues that are happening around here, it affects the economy, and affects the tourism, it affects the restaurant business, and people won't buy wine. Wine is a luxury for them, so So everything affects economically for us. It affects, yes.
Yeah.
And that's why we are sometimes we are lucky that Terra Santa also is helping bringing the wines to the US. At least you diverse your let's say your market when things are not going very well in your region. You have another access, which is the US market. But again, I like people to buy the wine not because of emotional, how do you say, excitement, or they want to help. I want also for them to understand that this is a good product, that it is worth their money, and it is a product that they should remember to buy it again and again and again. Because there's a lot of hard work in that wine.
Vicky, are there any other natural wine producers on the West Bank right now?
No, we are the first winery that works with indigenous grapes. The other grapes, except Cremizan, Cremizan also works with indigenous grapes, but not totally. We work. We are the only winery in the region that works with indigenous grapes, because again, the philosophy of the indigenous grapes is because we want our wine to complement our food. We make this wine to complement our Palestinian cuisine, or the regional cuisine, because our food is made of a lot of lemon, a lot of garlic, a lot of black pepper. You want something to wash the palate, and that's why we believe that this, let's say, our orange wine, the Grapes of Wrath, is a complementary product for Palestinian cuisine. It's simple, and we like to make also wine for different occasions. There are like this year we had like three wines. We had like a light red that you can open a bottle and drink and enjoy any time of the day, and we had which is called the Stubborn Saints. And then we have the second wine, which is a more complex wine, which is I like to call it like a dinner wine. You have to decant an hour before, and to really have how do you say, a ritual around it, and enjoy it with dinner. As for Grapes of Wrath, I feel that Grapes of Wrath is a very diverse wine. It could go very well with any Palestinian dish, whether it has sumac in it, whether it has olive oil in it, or let's say like sushi or sashimi. Grapes of Wrath is a diverse wine.
Yeah. How widespread is organic farming in the West Bank?
Good question. I'm not very how do you say, knowledgeable of that aspect of the work, because Sari takes care of the farming and the vineyard. But every time the farmers are going into that direction, into that direction. And we are also in Philokalia, we stress on that, because we always say that they didn't have any pesticides 6,000 years ago, and they still were growing grapes. How come now we need all this pesticide? So there's this ongoing discussion every time we are at the vineyard, when we are working with the grapes. But again, I'm not that knowledgeable about that aspect of the work. Sari knows much better, like much more.
I'll try to put some links in the chat. We've gotten a lot of great media lately. Saudi, the winemaker, has done some pretty technical and getting into the philosophy and the production of the wine. So I'll try to put some of those media links in the chat as well.
Okay, yeah, no, that'd be great. Thank you. I think that pesticide usage and the way that it's been pushed on so many countries, that's also another example of colonialism too, and how it's impacted so many countries. It's basically mostly Western, largely American, but also European countries that make pesticides. I mean, now China makes a lot too, but just historically, in the way that it's been, that pesticides have become so widespread over the last 80 years or so. I think that's something that isn't really discussed enough in a farming context too, as a
Let,
big.
let, yeah, like also plowing the land. This year he experimented also with different kind of methods, and the farmers that work alongside, like they were like they could not understand what he was doing, and it proved that his method was the right method, was the appropriate method. I don't want to say the right method; it was the appropriate method. But again, my how do you say, my focus on Philokalia is. How to say, the wine the wine making in the cellar, and the customer service, and like the social aspect.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get someone's camera off. Whoever camera is that's on right now, if you don't mind, please turn your camera off. We would appreciate that. Thank you. So Miriam, when we talked last month about, was it last month? Yeah, it was last month. And you mentioned that really since October 7th, there's been things have really changed a lot for the growers. It's like on the Golan too, where they're unable to have access to their vineyards, where there are just, I don't know if there's checkpoints, and it really impacted the harvest this year. So do you mind talking about that a little bit? And also if both of you could talk about how since the October 7th, the situation has changed for the growers on the West Bank and the Palestinian growers in Gaza as well. Excuse me, on the Golan.
I think so. Golan, to be clear, there's Israeli vineyards in occupied Palestinian and occupied Syrian lands. There's our producers in Terra book. We have wines in Palestinian producers that are in the Galilee, so the north, on the border, near the border of Lebanon. So they are experiencing similar situations to what Vicky and Philokalia are in Bethlehem, in terms of the proximity of the illegal Israeli settlements to their vineyards is creating militarized zones that prohibit their access. The Israeli military is prohibiting, and settler violence, which is increased in the West Bank and within, what we call 1948 territories, has increased, parallel to what the escalations in Gaza have been. Settler attacks on land and periphery communities, people, towns, communities surrounded by encroaching settlements. So militarized zones and the encroachment of those are a very common tool of the Israeli occupation in terms of acquiring more land. I mean, Kremasan, Vicky noted, they are an institution. They're not just a small plot trying to do high level, experimental kind of piloting of growing. They're an institution, and they still had the Israeli apartheid, the security wall, go straight through their lands in an attempt to cut them off from their estate their estate vineyards. And the Vatican had to get involved in order to kind of push that checkpoint line a little back. I mean, so what's happening now is not new, but it is impacting. We lost an olive harvest, and if you look on our producers and their social media, they're speaking very clearly about what's happening in terms of their fear of losing a harvest for this upcoming year because their inability to tend to the land. And Vicky spoke to that a bit, the obstacle of having to once you even do have access, it's a matter of fear and operating still in a militarized situation. So that's the reality, and our producers in the Galilee are facing the same problem.
Yes, there's this constant danger. You go to the vineyard, you don't know if you're going to work or not, or if you're going to be approached by soldiers or not, or settlers or not. So it's very bad. Actually, it's very bad.
Well, I just want to ask something just about Gaza specifically, because Miriam, you had mentioned that Gaza has incredible potential too, and that's something that I really had never thought about before you brought that up. Obviously right now I don't know if anyone's making wine in Gaza, given the circumstance, but do you mind just talking about that a little bit? And
I mean, yeah, I can talk about it from my perspective I'm a Palestinian Christian that grew up in the Greek Orthodox Church. Their wine is a sacrament. We've partaken in wine, and wine production is something that has always been part of the historic legacy of the Christian communities in the region, including Gaza. So there probably is some small degree of production going on there. Whether that is important to focus on in this context or not, I think it's important to recognize that what is happening in Gaza is strategic because of the fertile nature of the land, because of the proximity to the water. That I think I gave you some nostalgia about how Gaza is. The world sees it as black and white, but those of us who've been there, spent time there, have loved ones there. It's and for all Palestinians, Gaza represents light and our future, because it represents the steadfastness of us, and our connection to the land. Palestinians, it's when you go to the region as a whole, and you can kind of very easily tell who understands the importance of the relationship to the land. You'll see young kids on like birthrights trips from from New York or somewhere in the USA, and they're throwing olives at each other or something. You don't understand that as appreciation of the land. Whereas you go to places like Gaza, where they're actually, I think I mentioned that Israel already has 70% of its agricultural production is in the lands right outside of Gaza. Their goals there, the US's goals to build a port there are very tied to the land. But who knows how to operate on that land? Who knows how to tend to that land? Our Palestinian farmers represent our culture. That is one of our cultural symbols, and it's also one of our symbols of resistance. I have my shirt of our Fedayeen, like these are our so it's so intrinsically tied. And I think I had told you that they had found, and Vicky mentioned it as well, remnants of the amphoras in Gaza. This was an ancient winemaking region, and it continues, despite the ecocide that is happening right now. It will always be a fertile land and signify that for Palestinians.
Yeah, I just remembered that there's this Palestinian artist. His name is Nasser Soumi. He helps us with the labels. He just finished a book of 40 years of research, and he just launched it on the 29th of March. It's about 40 years of wine in the region. And also he included Gaza, because Gaza's merchants were selling wine to Bordeaux. And this is according to the French archives. And again, there's a lot of richness in this land. And although the book is now written in French, but it is going to be translated hopefully to English, and it sums up how to say the history of the region. And his research took him 40 years about the grapes and about the wines in the region.
And Vicky, what's the name of the book again?
It's called. Let me check again. It's Levin and Le Palestine. It's in French.
Do you mind popping the name of the book and the author into the chat?
Wine and Palestine, a Millennium.
Okay. Do you mind writing that into the chat?
Yes.
I can do it, Vicky, if you want me to try to search it.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thanks. I'd love to read him, and I'm sure some of the other people who've joined us might be interested as well. Thank you.
There's a lot on ancient world winemaking and production, but sometimes you have to be careful because it is, like paid National Geographic ads from Turkey or Israel claiming historic lands that weren't actually called that at the time, right? So it's an interesting place to insert modern day colonialism in our histories. So that's why we appreciate you, letting us speak to them from our perspective.
Of course. Well, I just have one more question, and then if we have some time after that, I'd like to try to open it up to see if anyone else has any questions. I was wondering, and we just briefly touched on this, but are there any collaborations or information sharing between Palestinian and Israeli winemakers and growers? And if so, if it's changed over the last 6 months?
At least I could say that there was none from the beginning, and it did not change anything in the last 6 months, because from the beginning there's again collaboration with two equal people, with two people who have equality to land, to water, to facilities, and we don't have that from day one. And no, I'm sorry to tell you that we don't have any collaboration. And yes, we don't have.
I think we talked about it a little bit at the beginning too. The case study of Philokalia's operation next to the settlers' operation, and who has access to what, who's able to function as a business, wholesome business entity with its autonomy. The example I gave you in our first interview was about Oshkar, or Julia. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, actually, not Julia, Oshkar winery, another one. They've had to buy back their ancestral town, their ancestral family land, the grapes from those vineyards from Jewish settlers, Israeli settlers on their land. So that's an example of forced collaboration where they want to be making wine in their historic town, but this was the only way they were able to access their own land. So that's an example, but yeah. Also, you see, Israeli wine projects are not doing what we're doing. They're not using indigenous varietals. They're not, creating something that's based off of, the sustainability and sovereignty of the land.
Yeah, I don't know of any Israeli natural winemakers. It's not to say they don't exist. I don't know of anyone.
I can tell you, like in 2015, when Sari first had his first vintage, he made an amber wine, and no one knew what amber wine was in 2015. I think he was the pioneer of all this this work. No one knew about it, and he was ahead of everyone, and then everyone started to follow up. But yeah, he was the first one.
Well, so if anyone has any questions, please feel free to pop it into the chat. There's one question that I do have for all of you, and this is my last, at least for the moment. How is climate change impacting winemaking where you are, Vicky, like in Bethlehem and in the West Bank? I know you mentioned before about having a lack of access to water, which is not really so much for there not really being water, because the West Bank has water, but and I'm assuming you're dry farming probably. But I was just wondering if you've noticed impact specifically from climate change over the last few years.
I mean, the climate, of course, affects our grapes. That's why we try to make wine according to let's say to the grapes of that year. If again, these decisions, Sari takes them, but from what I understand, each year, like that he evaluates the grapes according to the let's say to the climate. But again, because we work with indigenous grapes, and the indigenous grapes are how to say, are very strong. They can survive any climate change. Like let's say if there's extreme heat, the roots of the vines are like so they're very strong that they can handle these things. But if you work with other grapes, they would be very, very affected. So luckily, we work with them.
Miriam, is there anything that you want to add to that? That like have any of your other producers talk to you about how climate change is affecting them?
Yeah, of course, our Lebanese operations have moved completely into the mountains. They are high elevation wines now, and some of the highest elevation wines of, in the hemisphere. The valleys are getting hotter, and of course, because of the dry farming, and that it requires to have. You have to make sure that all the factors are in place. It's taking a lot more intentionality and long-term planning for our producers. Yeah, of course. I think the harvests are coming early. I mean, there's a lot of, we'll taste it in the new vintages that we're going to see from some of the higher altitude vineyards, and really what they're trying to learn in this new climate and new terroir. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, great, thanks. So we have a question. Someone asked if there are any Israeli brands that come to mind that we should be avoiding. And I know this is a very loaded question, but somebody asked it, so I feel that I should ask you and sort of get your take on that.
I mean, I think I'm here to give you an action item, because I'm on the business side. I'm on the retail side, the consumer facing end here in California, in the US. We've made it into the market. We ask you to drink Palestinian wine, buy Palestinian wine, help us get more placements. So I could have easily gotten Pamela a bottle today. Create a culture in the industry, help us create a demand for ancient world wines that are true to that are using indigenous grapes and traditions, and going back to supporting those who are caretaking the land and creating these highly renowned beverages that we're enjoying here. Philokalia has created such a diversity, brought such a diversity to the American palate. And I've found that people that are usually scared to try different things, Philokalia receives them. And, you know, it gives them this spark and this interest to learn more. And it does not disappoint by any means. It creates many fans, and I believe that is the trajectory that Palestinian and Indigenous people and grape wine it has. So, you know, our answer to that would be help us promote Palestinian and our Indigenous varietal wines, because that's what's really going to give back in terms of sustainability in all ways.
Yes, drink Philokalia.
Vicky, somebody asked if you are also like Armenian.
Yes, I'm Armenian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes, I'm Armenian. I was born in Jerusalem, and I grew up in the Armenian Quarter.
And how old and how much of a presence of Armenians are there in Palestine?
In Jerusalem, we are, let's say, a small community with a lot of assets, because we've been here for thousands of years. And in the West Bank, you would see a couple of families living in Bethlehem, and some families live in Ramallah, but basically we're all around Jerusalem.
Yep.
Around Jerusalem and around the Armenian Quarter.
Miriam, maybe you could just mention some places where people, not just in the Bay Area, but in some other markets, might be able to find some of your wines, Philokalia specifically, but some of the other brands too.
Sure, we have a couple options for consumers. Right now, we have some accounts that are, it's moving fast. So where it's available, it's going fast, and that's a great sign. But if you're in California, we have a Sacramento restaurant called V's Paradise that serves Philokalia by the glass and by the bottle, and we will be having it by the glass in a wine tasting event on the 16th of May, and that's at a restaurant called V's Paradise in Sacramento, in Old Town. So you can enjoy some Philokalia there. You can get a bottle retail at Solano Cellars near the Berkeley area, and we just ran out in one of our SF restaurants that had it. So, you know, we have a couple links that we'll put into the chat where you will be able to order it directly from some of our online retailers in other states. But for California, we need you all to help us get more placements and create the demand. And we have some really high level restaurants that are featuring Philokalia, and you know, we'll put some media and some locations in the chat as well.
Okay, great. Yeah, so we're just about at the end. So if you don't mind putting it in the chat now, that would be helpful. Thank you. So yeah, I just want to see, Vicky, if there's anything else that you wanted to share before we let you go to sleep or go to have dinner or whatever it is you're going to do, because I know it's pretty late over there.
No, it's okay. First of all, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about our work and our project. And I want to, I would really appreciate people to at least do something that is not familiar, and take a bottle of Philokalia and enjoy Philokalia for what it is. And here in Palestine, we do make, and we intend to make, good products for you to enjoy.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure to chat with you, and I appreciate
Thank you
work
so
that
much.
you're doing, and wish, you know, I just hope that the situation, especially what's going on right now, can come to a place of peace soon, and that everyone there can get to a better space, which I know that's going to take a lot, but that is my hope for you. And in the meantime, I am happy to continue to support the work that you're doing. And again, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.